I guess we should just start at the very beginning for a minute. I mean, when you're first training with Dominic DeNucci, and maybe wrestling fans have seen what training camp's supposed to be like with Tough Enough, but that's a reality show. But I still can't imagine there was a day where Dominic said, okay, here's where we're going to do the hangman spot, kids. So how does that come about?
There was never such a day. Dominic was a real big believer on the basics and the fundamentals. And he spoke in parable-like ways. So he would say, for example, you can't make a complete sentence until you learn the words. You can't make a paragraph until you learn your sentences. And he wanted us to have the basic words and the basic sentences down before we went out and started constructing wild paragraphs. I think it was maybe a year into training where I decided I wanted to do something. It seemed crazy at the time. It was the backdrop over the top rope, a la Randy Savage. Mm-hmm. Savage was a big influence on all of us. And I think that can be evidenced by the fact that for a little while in 1990/91, when I was trying to figure out how to take this middle of the card Cactus Jack character and make him more threatening, more of a main event type guy, I sounded a little too much like Randy Savage. Did not think for a moment that I sounded that way when I was doing it. Wasn't until Eddie Gilbert called me out on it on a radio show. And then when I listened back to the stuff I did in Global, which was just a couple weeks before my WCW started, like, wow, I am taking on too many countenances of Randy Savage.
Give me an example.
Let me tell you something, Joe Pedicino. So there's it's Cactus Jack, but it's both of the voices come from inside the chat. They come from way down deep. I don't know if I actually said. Let me tell you something. So, and instead of ooh, yeah, it might be. Man, you're calling me. I don't have evidence right now.
But it got all over you at the time. Like, dang, maybe I was ripping a little too much.
But Eddie caught me off guard because I didn't know that was the case. But a lot of the stuff was bottled, the way Savage, it was like he wasn't taking a breath. So Eddie Gilbert, when I get you, it's the Philadelphia Civic Center. It was a lot of tension in here without any breathing and in a deeper voice. And then it was a short segue from there to doing the stuff that would later be Cactus Jack that not many people would confuse with Randy's. But I'd say for the first 4 or 5 months I was with WCW, there was a little bit of an overlap. And hopefully Randy takes that as the Savage family takes that as a compliment. Because I understand, Lanny told me that Randy was... inspired by Furpo, the Wild Man.
Yeah, Pampero Furpo. Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Because I thought the oh yeah and all that was really borrowed from him.
Yeah, that was borrowed. We all borrow from each other. In this case, Randy would take that really beautiful backdrop over the top rope where he's landing on his feet and crumbling like it would be like something similar to what a paratrooper would do. But there's still a lot of risk on your knees and your ankles. And so we taped the heck out of my ankles, and it was a big build-up for me to do that move, and it didn't look nearly as good as Savage's. And later on, I would go on to just realizing that if stuff looked good in the ring and there was some question as to its authenticity, then if it looked good in the ring, it's going to look better outside on the floor.
Yeah.
And it was a big step, but it was a fairly easy step if you were willing to take the pain that came along with it. But as far as the hangman, I had taken note of it the first time in a magazine where Exotic Adrian Street had Randy Savage. It was Randy who had done the hangman, right? And I never saw Randy do the hangman a single time in WWE or WWF. But it was a photo of the hangman. Then it was the movie I Like to Hurt People. Awful movie, but still some good stuff in it, And I did steal a line from Terry Funk on the day that I met my wife, which was when I confronted a race car driver who took exception with me saying that what they did wasn't real or wasn't a sport. I took Terry Funk's speech that said, primitive man did one of only 3 things. They swam for their life, they ran for their life, or they do what I do and fought for their lives. They did not get in a car and drive away, and thus unfolded the angle I met my wife at. So I'd seen it in that. I'd seen it in that movie. I'd seen it in the.
Who did it in the movie? Do you recall?
I can't remember. They had a great array of wrestlers taking great bumps for the movie, and Funk was in it, and Exotic Adrian Street. There's a lot of wrestlers in it. Good idea, mockumentary, but it was telling a story about a guy who had been decapitated using the hangman. So of course that intrigued me. And then I saw Don Morocco do it as a really creative way of a count out. So he was counted out outside the ring. And so back then with the VCR, you could pause and you could frame by frame it. And I would say, okay, here we go. So you have to make it look like it's part of your natural motion. You have to, in flying motion, get your head in between second and third, use your body's momentum and that bottom arm to twist the second rope over the top rope, and now you're hanging. So I will produce a photo for you of a young Shane Douglas looking down on Cactus Jack, who'd been caught up at an indie show. So I was doing this as far back as 86, because it was one of those things I could do. It required timing and momentum, not pure athletic skill. And also there was a very definite price to be paid, even in the days before the ropes were too tight, on but they were always going to be tight because you're twisting the second rope over the top rope. And so there's only a limited amount of tension. So, the idea is once you're in, you have to then try to pull just as much as you can just to squeeze out. But even when you squeeze out, there's an enormous amount of pressure on those ears. And prior to Germany, I had been stitched up on late night hospital visits about 4 times for that
on your ear
for that same move, and I'd probably been patched up another 5 or 6 times backstage. Or in one case, Gary Michael Capetta, the ring announcer, mentions that his mom had on a couple of occasions tended to my wounds. Because Gary he was the ring announcer. He was an employee. He didn't have to pay for his hotel rooms or his cars. And I liked riding with him. It wasn't like I was suffering. He was a good, fun guy to ride with. And he was like at the Courtyard by Marriott, which is not where I was when I was making those choices. I would later catch on and become a mainstay with the Midnight Express in Corning, and in the Ford Taurus. And then I would have to pay for my hotels because those guys like to be on their own.
Sure.
And besides, it was always interesting to hold a drinking cup up to Stan Lane's room and hear what might be. When a guy shows up with 26 bottles of baby oil, that's a good night for you to do some investigative reporting. So you know what? I hate to say this is borderline. This is risque for Foley, but I was thinking, I got the Folgers going on here, and they've got that great jingle. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup, and I'm thinking, I'm guessing that guy never had an adventurous girlfriend or wife.
No, he did not. He did not at all.
As good as this coffee is, I don't think I'm ready to put it on that other level.
No, I can think of a few things that might be better.